In the unforgiving spring of that year, a mother black bear faced the most heartbreaking decision of her life. Her massive frame, once powerful and commanding, had withered to a skeletal shadow of its former glory. Each step she took sent waves of exhaustion through her weakened body, but it was not her own suffering that drove her forward. It was the pitiful whimpers of her two dying cubs that shattered her heart and pushed her beyond the boundaries of her natural instincts. The winter had been unusually long, stretching far beyond its normal course. When they emerged from their den, the forest that should have welcomed them with early spring berries and fresh vegetation remained locked in winter's grip. Day after day, the mother bear led her cubs through their usual foraging grounds, only to find barren bushes and frozen earth. The small prey that usually scurried through the underbrush seemed to have vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence that echoed through the empty forest. Her cubs, born during the dark days of winter, had never known the feeling of a full belly. Their small bodies, which should have been plump and energetic, had become frighteningly thin. Their once glossy black fur hung in dull patches, revealing skin that clung desperately to their tiny frames. When they walked, their legs trembled with every step, and their usual playful tumbling had given way to a quiet lethargy that terrified their mother. The mother bear's instincts screamed at her to keep her family deep in the safety of the forest, away from the dangers that lurked at its edges. But as she watched her cubs growing weaker with each passing day, a deeper, more primal instinct began to take hold. The fierce maternal drive that had guided her through 2 pregnancies and countless challenges now pushed her toward the unthinkable. For weeks, she had tried everything within her power to find food. She had dug through frozen ground until her paws bled, searching for roots and grubs that might sustain them. She had ventured into dangerous territories, risking encounters with other predators in her desperate search for nourishment. But each attempt ended in failure, and each failure brought her cubs closer to a fate she couldn't bear to contemplate. Their suffering became unbearable to witness. The stronger cub, who had once been the more adventurous of the two, now spent most of his time curled up against his mother's side, conserving what little energy remained in his tiny body. The smaller cub had stopped walking altogether, forcing his mother to carry him gently in her mouth as they moved through the forest. Their eyes, once bright with curiosity, had grown dull and listless, and their cries for milk had become increasingly feeble as her own body failed to provide the nourishment they so desperately needed. As the sun set on another unsuccessful day of foraging, the mother bear caught a familiar scent on the wind. It was the smell of human settlements, a scent she had been taught to fear and avoid since she was a cub herself. But mixed with that scent was something else, the promise of food. In that moment, looking down at her cubs huddled together for warmth, she made the decision that would change not only their lives but also touch the hearts of countless humans in ways no one could have predicted. With the last rays of sunlight fading behind the mountains, she gathered her remaining strength and turned toward the distant lights of the human world. Her maternal instinct, more powerful than her fear, drove her forward into unknown territory. As she gently picked up her weakest cub in her mouth and nudged the stronger one to follow, she embarked on a journey that would soon leave an entire community in tears. The first light of dawn painted the sky in pale shades of pink as the mother bear and her cubs emerged from the forest's edge. Their dark figures moved like shadows through the early morning mist, the mother's usual graceful stride replaced by an exhausted stumble. Every few steps, she stopped to check on her cubs, her eyes filled with concern as she watched their struggle to keep moving. The stronger cub followed behind her, his small legs shaking with each step. His journey was marked by frequent pauses, his tiny body swaying with fatigue before he could continue. The mother bear carried her weaker cub gently in her mouth, feeling his rapid, shallow breathing against her muzzle. His small body had grown so light that she could barely feel his weight, a reality that filled her with increasing desperation. As they ventured deeper into the human settlement, unfamiliar sounds and scents surrounded them. The mother bear's instincts screamed at her to retreat, but the promising aroma of food drew them forward. Her nose picked up traces of fruit trees, garden vegetables, and the lingering scent of human meals. Each new smell gave her the strength to take another step, even as her own exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. The neighborhoods they passed through were still quiet in the early morning hours. Occasionally, a car would pass in the distance, causing the mother bear to freeze momentarily, pressing her cubs close to her body in protection. The stronger cub would tremble against her leg, while the weaker one remained motionless in her gentle grip. These moments of terror were overcome only by their desperate need for food. Their progress was painfully slow. What would normally have been a brief journey for a healthy bear family became an exhausting odyssey. The mother bear had to stop frequently, placing her weaker cub down to rest while encouraging the stronger one to keep moving. During these breaks, she would scan their surroundings with increasing anxiety, knowing that each passing minute brought a greater risk of human encounter. The sun had risen higher in the sky when a particular scent caught the mother bear's attention. It was different from the others, somehow more promising. The aroma came from a yard that seemed more secluded than the others, surrounded by mature trees and dense shrubs. Something about this place called to her instincts, offering a glimmer of hope in their desperate situation. This yard belonged to Jennifer Miller, though the bear family had no way of knowing that their choice would lead to an extraordinary chain of events. The property sat at the end of a quiet street, its backyard backing up against a small wooded area. Fruit trees lined one side of the yard, their branches still bare from winter but promising future abundance. Bird feeders hung from several trees, and a small vegetable garden, recently prepared for spring planting, occupied one corner. With the last of her strength, the mother bear guided her stronger cub toward the yard's edge. Her weaker cub had grown completely still in her mouth, his breathing now so faint it terrified her. The morning sun illuminated their desperate condition in harsh detail, their protruding ribs, their dull, patchy fur, their trembling limbs. They were a family on the brink of collapse, their very survival hanging by a thread. As they crossed into Jennifer Miller's yard, the mother bear gently laid her weaker cub in a patch of soft grass beneath a large oak tree. The stronger cub collapsed beside his sibling, both of them too exhausted to move further. The mother bear stood over her cubs, her powerful maternal instinct warring with her natural fear of humans. In this moment, she had placed all their lives in the hands of fate, hoping that someone would see their plight and show mercy. Jennifer Miller's morning began like any other as she made her way downstairs to prepare her morning coffee. The early sunlight streamed through her kitchen window, illuminating her peaceful backyard. As she waited for her coffee to brew, she glanced outside, expecting to see the usual morning birds at her feeders. Instead, her heart nearly stopped at the sight that greeted her. There, beneath her old oak tree, lay three dark figures that would forever change her life. At first, her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The larger figure was unmistakably a black bear, but something was terribly wrong. The bear's appearance defied everything Jennifer knew about these normally robust creatures. Its frame was so gaunt that every rib was visible through its patchy fur, and its posture spoke of complete exhaustion. As Jennifer's eyes adjusted to the scene, her hand flew to her mouth in horror. Beside the mother bear lay two tiny cubs, their conditions even more heartbreaking than their mother's. One cub lay completely still. Its small chest barely moved with shallow breaths. The other occasionally lifted its head in weak attempts to move, only to collapse back onto the grass. Their emaciated bodies told a story of prolonged starvation that brought instant tears to Jennifer's eyes. The mother bear, sensing human presence, slowly raised her head. What happened next would be forever etched in Jennifer's memory. Instead of the fierce, defensive behavior she expected, the bear's eyes met hers through the window with an expression that seemed to transcend the natural boundaries between species. Those eyes, filled with exhaustion and what Jennifer could only describe as desperate hope, held none of the wild fear she would have expected. Jennifer stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she watched the mother bear struggle to her feet. Rather than positioning herself defensively between her cubs and the potential threat, the bear took a few unsteady steps toward the window. Her movements were not threatening but seemed almost pleading. She swayed slightly, her weakness evident in every movement, before looking back at her cubs and then returning her gaze to Jennifer. The reality of the situation hit Jennifer with overwhelming force. This mother had brought her dying cubs to her yard not by chance, but in a desperate plea for help. The smaller cub had not moved since she first spotted them, while the stronger one made occasional whimpering sounds that carried through the morning air, each cry piercing Jennifer's heart like a physical pain. Unable to contain her emotions, Jennifer sank to her kitchen floor, her body shaking with sobs. The coffee maker beeped in the background, unnoticed, as she grappled with the weight of the moment. She knew the dangers of interfering with wildlife. She had heard all the warnings about feeding bears and the risk of them becoming dependent on humans. But as she looked again at the desperate family in her yard, she realized this was different. This was not about interference but about basic compassion in the face of imminent tragedy. In that moment, Jennifer Miller made a decision that would spark an extraordinary chain of events. Her trembling hands reached for her phone, but not to call animal control or the police. Instead, she dialed the number of her friend Sarah, a local wildlife rehabilitator she had worked with in her volunteer days at the animal shelter. As she waited for Sarah to answer, Jennifer kept her eyes fixed on the bear family, watching as the mother gently nuzzled each of her cubs. The morning sun now fully illuminated the scene, revealing every devastating detail of their condition. The cubs' fur, which should have been glossy and thick, hung in dull patches that barely covered their skeletal frames. The mother's massive head seemed too heavy for her weakened neck to support, yet she remained standing, her eyes never leaving Jennifer's window. It was a tableau of both heartbreak and hope, a moment suspended between tragedy and the possibility of salvation. As Sarah's voice came through the phone, Jennifer's words tumbled out between sobs. "Sarah, you need to come right away. I have a mother bear and two cubs in my yard. They're starving. The cubs are dying. Please hurry, we have to help them." Her voice broke on the last words, but she knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to change. While waiting for Sarah's arrival, Jennifer knew every minute counted for the starving family. Her hands shook as she gathered honey, oats, and fresh fruits from her kitchen. Years of wildlife education had taught her the dangers of feeding bears, but these were extraordinary circumstances. She knew these cubs might not survive the time it would take for official help to arrive. Sarah arrived within 15 minutes, her truck loaded with emergency wildlife supplies. Close behind her came Dr. Michael Chen, the region's leading wildlife veterinarian, who had dropped everything when he received Sarah's urgent call. Their arrival drew the attention of nearby neighbors, who emerged from their homes to witness the unfolding situation. The news spread quickly through the community's group chat, and soon, more help was on the way. The wildlife experts worked with focused urgency. Dr. Chen assessed the cubs from a safe distance through his binoculars, his expression growing grave as he noted their critical condition. He prepared a special emergency feeding solution, one designed specifically for severely malnourished wildlife. Meanwhile, Sarah carefully arranged feeding stations at strategic distances, ensuring the bears would feel secure enough to approach. Jennifer watched through tears as the mother bear cautiously observed their activities. The bear's behavior defied normal wildlife patterns. Instead of showing aggression or fear, she remained calm, as if understanding that these humans represented her cubs' last hope for survival. Her eyes followed their movements with an intelligence that touched everyone present. The first feeding was a moment that brought tears to every witness. Dr. Chan and Sarah placed small portions of the emergency food mixture, along with fresh fruits and protein-rich foods, at varying distances from the bears. Then, everyone retreated to a safe distance, holding their breath as they watched. The mother bear slowly approached the nearest feeding station, sniffed the food carefully, and then did something remarkable. Instead of eating herself, she gently nudged her stronger cub forward. The small cub stumbled toward the food, its weakness evident in every step. As it began to eat, soft sobs could be heard from the gathered neighbors. Jennifer pressed her hands to her mouth, tears flowing freely as she watched the mother bear carefully carry her weaker cub to the food. The mother's gentle encouragement of her cubs, ensuring they ate first despite her own obvious starvation, touched something deep in everyone's hearts. Dr. Chen wiped his eyes as he documented the feeding. In his 20 years of wildlife veterinary work, he had never witnessed such a scene. The mother bear's trust and intelligence, her obvious dedication to her cubs, and her careful cooperation with their intervention defied everything he had experienced. He spoke softly to the gathered crowd, explaining that this was not just about feeding hungry bears but about witnessing something extraordinary in the relationship between humans and wildlife. As the cubs gained enough strength to eat more steadily, the mother bear finally began to eat herself. Her movements were careful and deliberate, keeping constant watch over her cubs while accepting the life-saving nourishment. The transformation in the cubs was almost immediate. Their eyes brightened, and the weaker cub began to show signs of renewed energy. The gathered community watched in tearful silence as the bear family ate. Neighbors who had initially arrived with concerns about safety now stood with phones recording the moment, their own tears falling freely. Social media channels began buzzing with the first shared videos of the feeding, touching hearts far beyond their small community. Sarah and Dr. Chen carefully monitored the feeding, ensuring the bears didn't eat too much too quickly, which could be dangerous after such severe starvation. They prepared additional portions for later, knowing this would be just the first step in a long recovery process. The mother bear's careful acceptance of their help, her gentle guidance of her cubs, and her obvious gratitude created a connection that transcended the usual boundaries between wildlife and humans. As the morning progressed, it became clear to everyone present that they were part of something remarkable. This wasn't just about saving 3 bears, it was about witnessing the power of compassion, the strength of a mother's love, and the extraordinary moments that occur when humans choose to help rather than turn away. The news of the starving bear family spread through the community like wildfire. By afternoon, Jennifer's quiet street had transformed into a hub of compassionate activity. Neighbors arrived carrying carefully researched, bear-appropriate foods, their offerings coordinated through Dr. Chen to ensure they were suitable for the recovering family. Each person who witnessed the bear's condition left with tears in their eyes and a determination to help. Local wildlife photographer Thomas Anderson captured the bear's story through his lens, documenting their journey from desperate arrival to gradual recovery. His photos, showing the mother bear's gentle care of her cubs and their initial frightening condition, touched hearts across social media platforms. One image, in particular, captured public emotion. The mother bear watching over her sleeping cubs after their first proper meal, her eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and hope. The local news station arrived to cover the story, but instead of sensationalizing the situation, reporter Maria Santos delivered a touching narrative about community compassion and the bridge between humans and wildlife. Her voice cracked with emotion as she described the bear's condition and the extraordinary response from the community. The segment ended with footage of the mother bear gently guiding her cubs to their feeding station, causing even veteran cameraman Joe Peters to wipe away tears. Wildlife organizations from across the state reached out to offer support. The Regional Wildlife Conservation Center provided specialized feeding equipment and medical supplies. The State Bear Research Team sent experts to monitor the family's recovery and document this unprecedented case of human-wildlife cooperation. Their presence ensured the bears received optimal care while maintaining necessary safety protocols. The emotional response spread far beyond their small town. Social media channels filled with messages of support and concern from people around the world. Children sent drawings of the bear family, seniors offered to contribute their Social Security money for food, and local businesses donated supplies. The comment sections under every shared photo and video became spaces of shared hope and compassion. Jennifer's yard became a carefully managed sanctuary under Dr. Chen's guidance. The community established a structured feeding schedule that would help the bears recover while preventing dependency. Volunteers took shifts observing the family from safe distances, monitoring their progress, and ensuring their safety. Each small improvement in the cubs' condition was celebrated by the entire community. The mother bear's trust in their help seemed to grow with each passing day. She remained cautious but appeared to understand the routine they had established. Her careful cooperation touched everyone involved in her care. Wildlife experts noted how she kept her cubs at safe distances from humans while still accepting their help, displaying remarkable intelligence and adaptation. Local schools used the bear story to teach lessons about wildlife conservation and compassion. Children wrote essays about the importance of helping animals in need, and many families donated to wildlife protection causes. The community's response showed how one act of kindness could spark a movement of positive change. As news crews documented the story, they captured countless moments of human emotion. Tough construction workers wiped away tears while watching the cubs grow stronger. Elderly residents spent hours sitting safely in their cars, praying for the bears' recovery. Even seasoned wildlife officials found themselves moved by the outpouring of community support and the bears' gradual transformation. The situation created unexpected unity in the community. People who had never spoken to their neighbors found themselves working together to help the bear family. Cultural and social barriers dissolved in the face of this shared mission of compassion. The bear's story became a reminder of humanity's capacity for kindness and the powerful bonds that can form when people unite to help those in need. Each passing day brought visible improvements in the bear family's condition. Within a week, the most dramatic change appeared in the cubs. Their once dull eyes now sparkled with renewed life, and their frail bodies began to fill out with proper nourishment. The weaker cub, who had arrived nearly lifeless, now stood steadily on his own feet, his transformation bringing joyful tears to everyone who had witnessed his desperate arrival. Jennifer maintained a daily photo journal of their recovery, capturing moments that showed their incredible journey back to health. The images told a story that moved thousands. From the first day when their ribs protruded sharply through patchy fur to the miraculous transformation, as their coats regained their natural glossy black sheen. The mother bear's face, once gaunt and haunted, filled out to reveal the beautiful creature she truly was. The most heartwarming development came when the cubs began to play. Their first tentative tumble brought gasps of delight from the observers. Soon, the yard echoed with the sounds of cubs wrestling and chasing each other around the oak tree. The mother bear watched her playing cubs with visible contentment, her own strength returning enough to occasionally join their playful activities. Dr. Chen's regular health checks confirmed what everyone could see: the bear's vital signs improved dramatically, their weight increased steadily, and their behavior showed all the natural vigor of healthy wild bears. The mother bear's recovery particularly impressed the wildlife team. Her body healed rapidly once she received proper nutrition, revealing the magnificent animal she had once been. The emotional impact of their recovery touched everyone involved. Volunteers who had watched them through their darkest days now found themselves crying tears of joy. Jennifer often sat by her window, overwhelmed with emotion, as she watched the cubs bouncing energetically through her yard, barely recognizable as the dying creatures she had first discovered. Social media updates about their progress drew thousands of joyful responses. People who had followed their story from the beginning shared in the celebration of each milestone. Videos of the cubs playing went viral, accompanied by comments filled with heart emojis and tears of happiness. The contrast between their arrival and recovery photos moved viewers to tears, reminding everyone of the power of compassion and community action. The story of the starving bear family and their remarkable recovery captured hearts far beyond their small town. Major news networks picked up the story, sharing it across continents and languages. Videos of their journey, from their desperate arrival to their joyful recovery, spread across social media platforms, drawing millions of views and shares. People around the world found themselves invested in this tale of survival, hope, and human kindness. Comments and messages poured in from every corner of the globe. A school teacher in Japan shared how she used their story to teach her students about compassion. A wildlife photographer in Africa spoke about how the bear story reminded him of similar experiences with desperate animal mothers seeking human help. Even celebrities shared the story, bringing even more attention to the power of community action in helping wildlife. The impact on wildlife conservation was immediate and profound. Wildlife organizations reported unprecedented increases in donations and volunteer applications. People who had never considered themselves wildlife advocates found themselves deeply moved to action. The bears became symbols of the delicate relationship between human development and wildlife survival, prompting discussions about conservation in urban areas. Local governments began receiving inquiries about wildlife protection protocols. The success of this community's response became a model for others to follow. Wildlife experts used the story to demonstrate how human communities could safely coexist with and support local wildlife populations. The bear story challenged the traditional belief that human-wildlife interactions must always end in conflict. Personal testimonials from viewers touched everyone involved. A young girl in Australia sent a hand-drawn picture of the bear family, writing about how their story helped her understand the importance of helping animals in need. An elderly man in Canada shared how watching their recovery gave him hope during his own health struggles. These emotional connections crossed cultural and linguistic barriers, uniting people in their concern for the bears. The greatest impact came in changing perspectives about wildlife. People who once feared bears began to see them differently. The mother bear's intelligence, her trust in human help, and her devoted care for her cubs revealed a depth of animal consciousness that many had never considered. Her story helped people understand that wild animals were not simply creatures to be feared or avoided, but beings capable of complex emotions and remarkable resilience. Researchers and wildlife behaviorists studied the case extensively. The mother bear's unusual behavior, seeking human help rather than avoiding it, sparked new discussions about animal intelligence and adaptation. Her ability to understand and cooperate with human assistance while maintaining her wild nature challenged existing theories about wildlife behavior. Environmental organizations used the bear story to highlight larger issues of habitat loss and climate change. Their desperate situation became a powerful example of how changing environments force wildlife to adapt and sometimes seek human contact. The positive outcome of their story offered hope that humans and wildlife could find new ways to coexist in a changing world. The power of compassion shown in this story resonated deeply with people everywhere. It demonstrated how a single act of kindness could spark a movement, bringing out the best in human nature. The community's response showed that when people unite for a common cause, extraordinary things become possible. Their story became a reminder that every individual has the power to make a difference in the lives of others, whether human or animal. As summer approached, the bear family's transformation was complete. The cubs had grown into strong, playful youngsters, their bodies healthy and their spirits vibrant. The mother bear had regained her magnificent stature, her coat gleaming in the sunlight, all traces of her desperate condition erased by time and care. Dr. Chen confirmed what everyone could see: the family was ready to return to their natural habitat. The community gathered one last time to witness their departure. Jennifer's yard, which had become a sanctuary of hope, now prepared for a bittersweet farewell. The mother bear seemed to sense the change, her behavior showing a new restlessness that signaled her readiness to return to the wild. The cubs, now full of energy and natural instincts, began showing more interest in the forest beyond the yard. On their final morning, the mother bear led her cubs to the edge of Jennifer's yard. She paused, turning to look back at the gathered community members who had saved her family. In that moment, tears flowed freely as everyone remembered the desperate mother who had arrived with dying cubs just months before. The contrast between then and now overwhelmed every heart present. The bears disappeared into the forest with confident steps, leaving behind a community forever changed by their presence. Their story became part of the town's identity, a testament to the extraordinary things that can happen when compassion overcomes fear. Jennifer later placed a small plaque beneath the old oak tree, marking the spot where a mother's desperate gamble had touched countless hearts. The legacy of the bear family lived on in changed perspectives and ongoing wildlife conservation efforts. Their story continued to inspire acts of kindness and unite people in the cause of protecting wildlife. Local children grew up learning about the mother bear, who taught their community about trust, compassion, and the power of coming together to help those in need. As the bears vanished into their natural habitat, the tears shed were not of sadness but of joy and hope. Their survival and return to the wild represented everything beautiful about the human capacity for kindness, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope and compassion can light the way forward. If this incredible story of compassion and survival touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring wildlife stories that remind us of the power of human kindness. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of animal lovers who believe in making a difference. Share this story to spread hope, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful moments come from helping those in need. Together, we can create more heartwarming stories of hope and healing in our natural world.